Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Awakening Potential Show. It's your gateway to the extraordinary. And today on the Awakening Potential Show, we have an incredible guest whose journey embodies resilience, empowerment, and transformation. Betty Norlin is a powerhouse in wellness education, guiding people to listen to their own bodies and actively shape their health, life, and even business. As a cancer thriver, transformational health coach, and international award-winning speaker, Betty's mission goes beyond words. She leads with action and compassion. She is a best-selling author of Our Bodies, The Optimal Design, an editor for over 40 books, including The Essence of a Woman. I have to take a moment. The Essence of a Woman. That's how I met Betty, because we're both in it. A true advocate for helping others share their stories in the world through her Write Your Heart Out series and her podcast, Be Healthy in a Hurry. Betty's impact reaches across the globe, inspiring others to own their wellness and their narrative. Welcome, 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 Betty. It's a pleasure having you here and sharing the journey and wisdom with us all.
Thank you, Karen. I am so excited to be here and be part of this. And I've had so much fun. I've gotten to know you through the Essence of a Woman project. And it's just been a blessing. The more time I spend with you, the more beautiful it is. So thank you.
The feeling is mutual because I didn't realize, we don't really know people until we take the time to really get to know each other, right? And this journey has been short, but yet I'm getting such a wealth about who you are. And we're so like-minded in so many different areas. Even though we've had different experiences, they still align on very many levels, which I absolutely adore and love. So I just adore and love you as well. So thank you for being a part of my world, a part of this show for certain. I'm curious, for the listening audience, like going back to your humble beginnings, did you ever think you would be where you are today? And was there anything back then that would have given you an indication that maybe you would be doing on the path that you're on now?
I don't think there was anything in my awareness that would have ever predicted that I was here. There wasn't anything that I knew. But what I do know is that when I was in high school, I used to pray. I was raised in a Christian family. We went to the Catholic church, so I did the catechism and all of that. So similar to Sunday school. And I remember in high school praying, God, I know I'm not supposed to ask, but if you're real, please prove it to me. And I prayed that a lot. And so there were two or three things that kind of formed me or directed me, I guess, probably through my 20s. One of the things is that when I went to college, I pledged a sorority, and the sorority was new on campus. It was the second year, it's Chi Omega sorority. And I remember sitting in a meeting, and one of the girls after a meeting said, "Can I share something heavy on my heart?" And others said, "Sure." And she's like, "We're so new on campus, but we're so fragmented. And, some of us are really into the whole faith thing. Some of us are really into the whole sports thing, but we're going in different directions and we're going in our own directions. And because we're so new, I'm just really afraid that if we don't address this and pull together, we may not survive on our campus." And that began an opening up and sharing for about 3 or 4 hours. And many of the sisters shared similar feelings. And what was really interesting to me and what was really cool to me is after that meeting, and now I was raised up north and then in Florida. I'm very private with my faith. I'm very private with my feelings. I don't share that with the outside world. I'm just really private. And I was in the Bible Belt of Alabama where I went to school. Troy State at the time. And everything that we competed in from that moment in probably January through the rest of the school year, we would get in a circle, we would hold hands, we would bow our head, and we would pray publicly. And it was the most uncomfortable feeling for me ever. But what was really interesting is everything we competed in, everything that entire spring we won. And it was interesting to me because it was very uncomfortable for me to share anything or to be visual or to be visible. And yet we weren't the greatest teams. We didn't have that track record before that. So that was to me one answer to my prayer from high school. If you're real, prove it to me, even though I'm not supposed to ask. The second thing that happened is my girlfriend and I were checking out different churches because we hadn't been to church for a while. And we were talking about what should we be doing? Like, what's our mission? What does God want us to do? Some people will believe that, some people won't. But what came into my spirit was writing and speaking. And I thought to myself, I can't speak. Like that's crazy. I can't do that. And writing, no thank you. I hated that growing up.
Right, right.
And so I joined Toastmasters and I was like, I don't know what the opportunity is going to be, but I'm going to be prepared when it comes along. And then a few years later, I got sick with chronic fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr virus. And that's the third and last thing that I want to share with this. And I always thought up until that point, if you get sick, the doctors will fix you. Like that was my mindset. That was my life experience. That was everything I knew and believed. And all of a sudden, I had a virus. And the doctors are telling me, we cannot do anything for a virus. Go home, rest, let your body take care of itself. And I thought, what? No, that's not how it works. But it took me 3 years to get back to my wholeness. And what I learned through that time was how to rebuild my immune system naturally. And then my inner spirit said, you must teach others about this. And so that's been the journey I've been on for 30 or 40 years. But those were some of the foundational pieces that probably put me on this path.
Yeah, I love that. I had an experience back in my 20s, Betty, where I had a massive car accident. I had a Mach 3, which was a Mach 2 rather, which was one of those green Mustangs that was like everybody wanted back in the day. And I had this muscle car. And I ended up hitting a boulder. I hit a patch of ice, car spun around. It was right before seatbelts were really, I'm aging myself, really there. And I ended up having a near-death experience. And I
Oh,
remember during that, yeah, right? I remember during that experience, I've always been a believer that things happen for a reason or season. And I remember waking up in the hospital. I remember the incident. And then I remember waking up in the hospital and my first thought was, what about my car? I ended up in the passenger seat, splintered the windshield. And I remember my first call wasn't to my parents because I was alone, wasn't to my siblings. It was to the auto mechanic. Is my car alive? And he was like, what? He says, "Your
that's
car's
funny.
alive, right? You got to find humor in life, right?" And he says to me, I'm amazed you're alive because the car was smaller than a Volkswagen. And I always believed that those of us who have had near-death experiences have a higher purpose and a certain innateness when I speak to them. And while reading your bio as well, I noticed that you looked at it as a miraculous gift was the word you used, and I look at mine as a miraculous gift as well. So if you're okay talking about it, what were you had two, not one, but two. Yeah, I guess my second one in Costa Rica might have been one, but I didn't see the light in that one. I saw the light in the first one and the
Mhm.
tunnel. Yeah. What was your experience with that?
So I don't feel like I ever had like a near death experience per se. I think my experience with my chronic fatigue syndrome Epstein-Barr virus was discovery, surprise, and growth. discovery because we did not know what was causing my overwhelming fatigue. I'll tell you a short story. So I was in my 20s. I was a member in Florida of a snow ski club. And at the time, Florida had the third largest snow skiing club. So when I moved down from Michigan, I thought I'd never see snow again. I was so upset. And then through a series of events, I learned that Florida has snow skiers and I guess a lot of transplants, right? And so I went snow skiing out to the out west with this group. So much fun. I had a blast. 2 years later, I go out with this group again. And the first time I was the first one on the slope, the last one off the slope, and then the apres parties all night, tons of energy. But this time I couldn't get up and get on the slope until it had been open for a few hours. And then when I finished, then I was tired and I was exhausted. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm just getting older. 28 years old, I'm just getting older. I didn't put two and two together at that point that I had an issue. When I look back on it, I had a horrific flu about 3 or 4 weeks earlier that my body never recovered from. And because I never recovered from it, and because I was a pretty busy person, I don't think I ever allowed my body to heal properly. And so I kept pushing myself because I didn't know any better. And so I think that continued to wear me down until my body just said enough is enough. And so in my worst stages, I was in bed 20 hours a day, too weak to move for about 6 or 8 months. And then little by little, I started getting energy back, but I didn't know if I'd ever recover. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to work full time or even part time. There were so many unknowns. So I think it was the discovery that, yeah, there really is an issue. 8 months later, after many doctors, when they finally realized, let's take I guess the titer, TITRE, the test to see the Epstein-Barr virus, which is like the mono thing. And it was, did they say 400 times higher than it was supposed to be? So it was pretty extreme in my body. And so now I had a medical causation of what was going on. But at the time, before that, it was like, okay, just, get out and push yourself, just get over it. Like, don't, like, what are you doing? Like being lazy, like, no. And so it was interesting that I understood what was going on. And then as I shared, the doctors had no answers. So then it got kicked into learning how to grow through it and grow because of it, and then turn it into something that could benefit and help others. So that was one time, and it was a very, very difficult time. I'm going to talk about health, but I've had other issues like financial issues and like relationship issues, but I'm not going to focus on those in this episode. And then the second thing that I'll share is my breast cancer. So I got the cancer diagnosis, weirdest, funniest thing ever. So I go to my doctor, normal mammogram, whatever. I'm not thinking, and I get a phone call, and it was a Thursday night, like 7 o'clock at night when I get home, and I have 7 messages on my machine from the imaging place and from the doctor's office. So I can't call anybody back that night. And so the immediate thought that went through my head, and I don't believe this came from me, I believe it came from a higher power, but the immediate thought that went through my head is, oh, well, I guess they think there's something wrong. So for whatever reason, I was blessed that I didn't own the problem in that moment. I could have. Many of us probably would have, but I didn't. But I don't know why. I had grace. And so when I called the doctor back the next day, and they're like, we fully expect what we found to be malignant. So, okay. So then I'm telling people over about the next week and a half, and I'm repeating what the doctor said to me. And Karen, this I think is so funny. They fully expect it to be magnificent. No, that wasn't the word they used. They fully expect it to be marvelous. No, that wasn't the word. Like the word malignant disappeared out of my vocabulary for about a week and a half. And so every time that I tried to say malignant, it wasn't there. It was magnificent. It was, and so I think that was also through grace of a higher power helping me to understand that it's not that big of a deal. And then I've had a background in computers. So somewhere along the line, I'm like, okay, well, computers have malware and they can fix it, malicious malware, right?
Right, exactly.
So we can fix the malware in my body too, in my cells. So that was really the approach that I took. And I don't feel that it came from me, but I never was afraid of this thing called cancer. And I think the people that love me that were in my inner circle were much more afraid of it than I was. And, I think the other thing in those first probably 48 hours, well, I'm not ready to meet my maker, but if he's ready for me, okay. And since then, I wrote a book called The 31 Days, Faith versus Fear, the 31 Days of a Cancer Diagnosis. And that's a gift I'm giving to your listeners
Yes.
through my website, bettynorlin.com/31 days.
And
And
that's gonna be just a quick, that's gonna be in the show notes for those of you who want to get that. It will be in the show notes when it airs, so.
thank you. And it was just as I was going through my first 31 days, I would sit out on my back porch and I got water behind me and trees. And I got into the most beautiful, peaceful reflection time. And just the most beautiful thoughts came to me. And then I was able to apply many things that I'd learned about natural health and healing over the years, because it was a study from back when I had the chronic fatigue that I was able to apply in my life. And I did the blended approach. So it wasn't only traditional, it wasn't only holistic. I put them both together.
Absolutely.
And um, I've had several other things, but I got diagnosed several years later with something called Guillain-Barré. However, it was a milder version called Miller-Fisher syndrome. So all of a sudden I couldn't talk. All of a sudden my words are slurred. All of a sudden I try to chew something and I start choking. And then I try to walk and I need to grab onto my sister's shoulder because I can't balance. So basically that was a virus that affected the nervous system. And luckily, the doctors that I had figured it out. I spent a week in the hospital. They gave me some IV drop or drip or whatever it was. And luckily, I healed. Not everybody does. The bigger Guillain-Barré, and I don't think I'm saying that right, can affect people in a pretty strong way. So there's some other things, but those will be three that I'll share with you.
And as a result of that, you were medical intuitive, or you became a medical intuitive? Is that?
I don't even call myself that. I I what I see in myself and my mission and my message to the world is when I went through my chronic fatigue, like my first experience, what I learned, what I was taught through my experiences, through my guidance, was that the body is designed in a perfect order from head to toe in 10 different places. So in my book, Our Body's the Optimal Design, I talk about those 10 places. For example, I'll give you your listeners one example. The eyes, there's something called iridology. Here in the West, we don't always recognize that as something credible. In Russia, you have to be a medical doctor to practice it. But what happens is from the pupil to the outside of the iris, there's 7 rings. So the outside ring is the skin. The third ring from the pupil is the colon. And so each ring represents different parts of the body from the inside out. And then the other thing that happens with the eyes is the very top of the eye, if somebody knows how to read the eye through iridology, it represents the brain. If you go around one side of the eye, it's going to reflect the organs on that side of your body. If you go along the other side of the eye, it's going to reflect the organs on that side of the body. And I was just absolutely fascinated that it's in order from head to toe. It's in order. It's not like swatch here, swatch there. It's in order in our hands, in our feet, in our colon, in our ears, in our face, in other places. How did that just haphazardly happen? Like that doesn't. And so for me, I was absolutely blown away and amazed. And I knew that was a story I needed to take to the world. And so I wrote the book and I published that in 2012. I've written an online class that I made available through my website about 2 years ago. In the book, The Essence of a Woman, I talk about that and some other pieces. But to me, I want to teach people, both businesses that are trying to help their employees or individuals that are trying to help their own health. I want to teach them the power that we have within us and give them hope and give them direction and let them know that they have more control than they realize. And then for business, what does your body teach you about business? It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you collaboration. So I take these points that the body teaches both for health, but I tie it into a business intention and a business purpose so that you can use it for your bottom line. And so that really is the mission and the message that I believe I was born to deliver to the world.
I love that. And you're a school teacher.
I am. I am.
So how'd you get into that? I mean, that's like,
All right, I'll tell you the real story. So for my first career, I was in business, so speaking and training. I did wellness programs at hospitals all through Florida, and I loved it, and I loved it all. And then the 2000, the 1999, 2000 hit, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, everything's going to drop. So during that time, I had worked for 2 startup companies, one that didn't pay me for 3-4 months. I'd gone through with that 2 mergers and acquisitions, 3 hostile takeovers. It was too much. And I was just like, I have to have something stable. I can't do this anymore. I also wanted to improve my facilitation skills because I knew I was born to speak and train and write. And so through a series of events, I had the opportunity to get into teaching, which ironically, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So when I initially went to college, I went to become a music teacher and a math teacher. And so I basically got into teaching and ended up staying much, much longer than I had anticipated. But what's really beautiful about that connection and how our life can unfold is that I taught math for many years. With math, there's a divine ratio. Leonardo da Vinci teaches the divine ratio, and he made it famous through his artwork, The Vitruvian Man. And so I take a lot of what he taught, and that's what I've applied into my programs, into my books, into helping us understand this sacred geometry and this amazing divine ratio that you find in the stock market, in leaves, in our bodies, in music, in financial markets, everywhere. And so there's this order. There's this divine order. You talk about dancing with the divine. There's this divine order and just about everything. How can we not believe there is a creator and a maker? Oh my goodness. Like if you just look at the evidence, it's all around us. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
oh,
I know how I got into it.
no, and I get your passion and swing. And this is where you and I so align because I believe things come to us in signs and symbols. I hear messages through nature, through animals, through plants and such. And as a result of what you're talking about, there, talk to us more about the signs and symbols and numbers, especially being a math teacher, how it's channeled through you. And I know you had mentioned your guides are calling them soul frequency readings. So tell us more about that.
I'm not making that connection.
You had
So
written something about things, you're able to see signs, symbols, and numbers.
well, I think it's more I think it's more the obvious in front of us that we don't recognize. So for me, I teach people how to listen to their own body.
Yeah.
And I believe that there are subtle signs everywhere. Like you say, you hear from nature and you read things in nature. I'll give you a silly example that your listeners will probably go, oh, really? She's lost it. But I went to a workshop with one of my mentors, a beautiful workshop. This mentor is very well known, has amazing programs. It was really a great experience. The hotel that she happened to be holding it at had a roach or 2 or 3. So I remember walking through the lobby and I see a roach. And at first I'm not going to say anything. Then I'm sitting in her program and the girl next to me hits me. There's a roach on my shoulder. And so I am freaking out because I don't like those little critters at all.
I neither
And
do.
And I don't know that I necessarily do all the spirit animal stuff, but I've got a friend that does. And so I was curious. And so I knew that I had to tell her because I wanted to make sure she was aware because I didn't want her other participants experiencing what I was experiencing. And so I looked up roaches and was talking about keeping steadfast and being strong and being persistent, all these positive things. And I'm laughing to myself because I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like, I'm so grossed out by this whole roach experience. And yet, if I look beyond it to the message is all this positive, you're on the right track, you're strong, you're resilient. And then I'm like, I never would have made that connection. So sometimes it's listening beyond what we see or what our thoughts or what our perception is. And when I teach people how to listen to their own bodies, there's something called body kinesiology that many of your listeners probably are aware of. They probably use, but I've used 5 or 6 different approaches with that. And one of the methods that I teach people is how to tune in and listen to your body to the point that it can tell me what food to eat, what's good for me, what's bad for me in this moment, because the food today might not be good for me, but in 6 months from now, it might be fine for me. And
Exactly.
and so decisions on dating, decisions on investment, decisions on career change. And it's just a method that I happened across that I've used that's always been right, always been right. And it's not that I make my decision based on that, but
Yeah.
I use it as a check-in to
Yes,
help me filter when I'm making a decision.
absolutely. And the body doesn't lie. The body, I like to say the body holds the score. That was an awesome book. Absolutely. So I'm curious, what's the one thing that's awakened your potential, like more than anything else?
I really want to say Dr. Jody Bear, which is the project you and I have been on with the essence of a woman. Um, but I think even before her, it was Allie Savage, who I actually met Dr. Jody Bear through somebody I knew from Clint Arthur and from Allie. Um, so I think probably 2 or 3 things. Being open to coaches and mentors and like I remember praying for a mentor and then Allie's husband and Allie show up in my life and they've been the most amazing blessing ever. And through them, I ended up meeting Manny Lopez and then met Dr. Jody Bear. And so I think it's when others believe in me more than I believe in myself, when others see the potential in me more than I see in myself, and when they feed into me, when they love into me, when they encourage into me, when they passion into me. And so I think for me, it's been allowing myself to be open to receiving because it isn't always what I think about myself. I don't see what others see in me. I don't see always my potential. And I think in the biggest of pictures, my faith has been very strong. When I could do nothing, my faith carried me through and it opened doors. I remember after the chronic fatigue, I moved from West Palm Beach to Tampa. I prayed for 4 things: to live with somebody I knew, to live on the water, to have a pool, and to not pay more than what I was paying. So I've been out of work for 3 years. I wasn't paying rent. I was paying $200 a month for the cleaning lady and the yard people. And when I prayed about it at first, I got a very strong intention that said, no, not now, don't move now, wait 6 months. And when I prayed in 6 months, I got a very strong intention that said, yep, now, okay. And would you believe that I ended up all 4 of those things came into alignment
Love it.
immediately. So I think my faith has definitely probably been the biggest piece, but through my faith, the people that have come into my life and me being open to listening and learning and loving people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so interesting you say that because I had this flashback to living on the river and it was the best time of my life. And like you, I prayed for it and I was steadfast. And I remember I had taught law of attraction. I was teaching universal laws back in the day, and I still do, but more so then. And of course, law of attraction was one of the big ones because, what was it? The Secret had just come out at the time, and yeah, of course, that was missing pieces to it. But everybody would think if they would just sit there, the elephant's going to appear in the room, kind of thing. And so I remember sitting there praying the same thing. And I had taken my daughter down to South Florida for her last year of high school. And I wanted to come back to Sarasota. And I wasn't living here, but that was my intention because I was living in Orlando. And when I had first moved to Florida 40 years ago, I said, someday, one day, I'm going to move down there. And of course, Sarasota at that point was like 2 lights and 2 lanes, and
Yeah, yeah.
farmland, and it was like one of those hippie kind of, I'm like, that's where I want to be. And yeah, I laugh at it now, but I remember coming here and I had a clear intention, holding this thought and having faith. And I said, I don't want to pay more than $1,200. I was paying $2,600 down in South Florida. I said, I want to save some money. I'm sticking with 26. I mean, I'm sticking with 12. I want trees. I want a gas range. I want water. And the realtor was looking at me like, right? So they took me to, like, it had none of it, but it was in the price range. And I said no. And I remember calling my girlfriend and her saying to me, remember that place on the river that's 2 doors down from me? It's up for rent. Would you be interested in it? And I remember saying in the time, my furniture won't fit in there. So sight unseen again, years later, I said, I'll take it. And he says to me, $1,400. I'm like, thank you anyway. I'm $1,200. And he comes back to me and he says, well, we really wanted 1,400. You pay utilities. And I'm like, no, I'm really sticking to $1,200. I still had my daughter with me at the time, and $1,200. So that's the best I could do at this point. 3 days later, I said, thank you very much anyway. I really appreciate your time and energy. He came back to me. He says, you drive a hard bark. And I was like, no, I'm just, I'm standing in my truth right now and really what I'm wanting. And he says, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you for the first 6 months for 900. You pay utilities. And after that, it's going up to 1,200. 6 months, 6 months later. It was the best time of my life. I
Wow.
was so at peace living on the river. I learned so much about life through nature and the animals and everything else. So you never know when you stand in faith and you put your intention out there, what you're capable of attracting into your life. And you just demonstrated that as well. And I love that. That just like I said, I want to demonstrate going back to the river because I miss it. Something fierce. Yeah.
It's funny because I remember in high school thinking it would be so cool to sail the Greek islands. Now, I never in a million years ever thought or expected I would ever sail the Greek island. And yet, I don't know, 10, 12 years later, I have an opportunity to go with my dad on a cruise. I think it was Royal Caribbean. It was one of the first cruises that they were doing over in the Greek islands.
Right.
We got the best price. It was the best experience. I went to like 5 of the Greek islands. It was amazing. And it's like, I wasn't even putting that into intention per se. It was just a thought. It was a fleeting thought. It was a thought I never thought would happen. And it
Exactly.
did. And it was cool. And it was beautiful. And it was amazing.
Yeah. I love that. I love hearing stories like that because they are inspiring. And I remember a time when I thought I could never do or be or have any of that. And now I don't think in terms of doing, I think in terms of being. And as a result of that, the doing and the having just sort of fall into play. Opportunity shows up. So you
Mhm.
never know when you change your perspective what life is going to do for you. Betty, this has been absolutely amazing. Is there any, I like to call them pearls of wisdom. Is there any pearl of wisdom you'd like to leave the listening audience with today?
I think what I would really like to just encourage every single one of you that's listening is risk being yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
Risk letting your essence shine. Risk stepping into something new and knowing if it doesn't work, it's still okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Betty. I so appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time and the energy, and it's later in the day here, and thank you for making it happen. I so appreciate you.
Karen, I loved every moment of it. Thank you. And thank you to all of you that are listening.
Yeah, thank you. And a reminder, all of Betty's information, including the free gift she's offering, will be in the show notes. So make sure you go there and seek her out. It will blow you away. So for the listening audience, thank you for joining us today on the Awakening Potential Show. And as you step back into your world, remember the bridge from ordinary to extraordinary is built in small steps, with small steps of change and big leaps of faith. So let today's insights from Betty Norlin be a guiding light as you navigate your own journey. Remember, you were born to be different, so make a difference and let your light shine. And until next time, continue to awaken your potential and illuminate the extraordinary within. Stay inspired. Bye for now.